Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. This one we start dismantling sparkles, pulling things off, the things I don't need, because I have to be a little bit careful about what I take off. I want to start the engine before I take too much stuff off, so I'll have to leave the engine in obviously, and I'll have to leave it so that we can stand it up when it's running. And we'll have to leave the landing gear on, that's what I mean, and the fuel tank of course. But there's something missing that I'm going to need, and that is somehow a way to start the engine, a way to control the engine, and a way to monitor the engine. Hey guys, before we start talking about the rebuild here, I just wanted to clarify something about the crash analysis videos and why I'm showing those. I really don't know. I know what caused the crash. The problem I really do have though, and because as you can understand with this sort of event, your confidence is shaken quite badly. I won't start regaining confidence now until I start flying again and get some instruction and then put some hours in a new aircraft. So the thing is, I don't yet still know how I could have identified that it was dangerous to land, that there was even a possibility that what happened was going to happen, and I really don't know. I mean, there wasn't enough turbulence to put me off. There wasn't, should I have come in faster? I've just seen a comment, I'll only touch on it briefly here, that I wasn't going fast enough. I should have been doing 65 at least miles per hour. My aircraft is in knots and I was doing 55 to 60 knots, which is 65 plus nautical miles an hour. So, yeah, 65 miles per hour, sorry. I mean, I looked for signs on the water. The windsock wasn't showing anything dramatic. My mate landed before me a couple of minutes earlier. I didn't think it was warm enough in the morning. I was wrong, maybe, if that was a thermal incidence. Anyway, that's where I'm at with it. That's why I'm showing you those videos, I guess. That's why I'm personally kind of challenged as to trying to find out the reason. I couldn't see the signs. What were the signs? I always remember my instructor during training telling me the signs are all there, just look for the signs. I don't know what signs. No white caps on the water, little ripples on the beach, I guess, on the water there, but those ripples generally come around from the point all the time. There's always waves on that beach unless it's dead calm for a few days. So that wasn't a sign, and being no white caps didn't indicate any strong wind. So no white cap signs. A smooth flight all the way up the west coast, which is the direction the wind was coming from the northwest. I flew and landed into the northwest. The wind was straight down the runway. But was it, or was there rotors there from some reason? And the windsock, even after the accident, indicates maybe 5 knots straight down the runway. The point is, I couldn't see any signs before I was trying to land, right up into the point until when things went nasty. Thanks for letting me clarify that, and I guess we'll never know. I guess it was just one of those things. Well, it's not what it used to be. So this series we'll be looking at rebuilding sparkles, and for that I'm going to need a lot of parts, and you probably need parts too. So this series I'll be taking you on a journey to show you what it takes to rebuild this aircraft after the crash. If you watch some of the previous videos, you'll see how this happened, and we'll be trying to get the parts from the manufacturer. Now the manufacturer is a new agent or new owner of the P&M Aviation brand, and they'll be assisting me as quickly as we can to get everything I need to make this aircraft airworthy again. I'm sliding off the seat, I shouldn't have sat here. So please come along on the journey, let's see what it takes, enjoy the rebuild, and let's support P&M Aviation. It's had some changes, but we're going to see if they can still support and continue to maintain our aircraft so that we can continue enjoying to fly. Did I say that I'll need a significant number of parts to complete this rebuild? So in this episode we'll be doing that, and I will be dismantling the instrument panel in preparation for building the new one. I'll build a mock instrument panel so that I can use that in the meantime. I have to order a new instrument panel, and we'll be designing a new layout for that, and this is the best design I've come up with so far. Some of the, I'll show that in a minute, some of the previous earlier versions of this design are these, and as you can see it's kind of evolved as time's gone on, as I've thought about it a bit more and decided how I want to do things. And I just wanted the best layout I could get. The only problem I've got now is I've got to drill all the holes and fit the instruments myself. There's not really a facility here for CNC routing such a panel, but I'm pretty confident. We'll do some testing anyway on the fiberglass that I've got to make sure that we can do this without butchering the new instrument panel. So we'll be dismantling sparkles, designing and making an instrument panel later on to come, but in the meantime we'll dismantle and remove the instruments that we've got now, and we'll be checking things over. In focus there, please. And we're going to put on the screen. That's the centre there. So then I've got to go, radio is 31 each way, go a bit wider. Radio is 31, so I should have gone. I have a new landing light. We'll be having a look at that. I've bought this landing light as a replacement because the other one's rusting. It's halogen, it draws a lot of current, and I've noticed that when the engine's idling in the past, the voltage will sag quite a lot when I turn the landing light on. So I've have a look at that LED light. I just wanted to bring you a brief clip here. I'll include this with the other videos, of course. I'm going to be replacing my landing light. The previous landing light, which I've just been testing, for some strange reason doesn't even work. Oh well, I guess I should have expected that. This is it here. It's a halogen bulb. It's 55 watts, which means at 12 volts it's drawing about 4.5 amps. And I always noticed when I turned the landing light on, especially at idle, the voltage would drop and everything in the aircraft, and it was never ideal. So 55 watts, I'm not sure what that is in lumens, but yeah, the bulb filament's actually broken, and that would have been from the crash. The bracket got fairly badly damaged. I've even partly straightened that. And the other thing is the bracket was rusting for a while now, so I wasn't ever really happy with the quality of the fact that the steel was going to rust. So I can't really test that on the battery, but we know it was 55 watts, and we know it was a halogen, and we know it draws about 4.5 amps. Now the thing I've just had arrive is one of these. It's a bit bigger, a bit heavier. It looks plastic, but it's actually alloy, aluminium, cast aluminium. It's got a decent size lamp in it. It's LED and 2000 lumens, and I'm going to say it's going to be much brighter than the halogen, and it draws 2 amps. So less than half the current at the same voltage. We're going to give it a try. Now the other thing is, I've also heard that halogen bulbs, they just draw a constant current. There's nothing funny or special about them. They don't generate electrical noise, but some LEDs do. So what we're also going to do is test it with my phone, my radio, my aviation radio, and see if we can hear any electrical noise while it's running. And we'll check the intensity of the light as well. So I'll just get things set up and we'll have a look. So the first thing we've done is we've connected the battery, and we've connected it through an amp meter. And if I just touch my amp meter probe onto here, you'll notice the light. Woohoo. And we're drawing 1.75 amps, exactly as specified on the packet. What we'll do now is we'll turn on the radio. Just put it next to the bulb, next to the lamp, and we'll do the same thing. I would say that's pretty noisy. Let's try it over here. Okay, so the next thing now is, we'll try it there, over there. How do you stop noise? That's how you do it. You put it further away. So I won't really know what this is going to do until I put it in the aircraft. And that's the beam on it as well. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is the size comparison. Now I do know that the new LED lamp, which is a very, very rugged construction, and it also comes with stainless steel mounting hardware. So this thing's not going to rust in a hurry, at least. Size comparison. Yes, the LED unit is a chunkier unit, but it's going to fit nicer under the nose of the aircraft, and the size of the lamp is about, the frontal area is probably a little bit bigger, but it's not all that much really different. It's not really going to have a detrimental effect on aerodynamics or anything like that. Did you guys catch the eclipse last night? Hey, wait, what's that? Is that the spirit of Sparkles waiting to return to its new body? I'll also be wiring up the new instrument panel. You'll see some of that going on. I'll just put that in. I don't really need to talk about what I'm doing. And when I say wiring it up, I actually mean connecting it to the aircraft. But before I can do that, I actually need to, let's see, identify all the wires that are in the Microlight now that come forward to the instrument panel, because some of them are a mystery. And well, check this out now. This is what I'm battling with here. I've got a few wires hanging out the front of the aircraft. So what I'll obviously have to do is work out what each one of those does, and if I can't do that, then I'll have to rewire it. And what we'll do is we'll label each one as we go. Now obviously this goes to the regulator, which is here. There's some miscellaneous earth and ground wires. That'll probably go on the battery. You know, some of it's obvious, radio antenna. This will be the intercom to radio patch lead. That'll be the other end of it, I guess. I think this one actually goes up to the back of the radio in the dash, into the header unit. Yeah, and there's just some other random connections here. We'll find out where they go, I'll label them, and then we'll work out what to attach them to. Fortunately, I've got something to work on as to finding out where these wires come from. Now there is another thing here. This is the RDAC, and this converts the engine analog signals from here, from up here, into a digital signal. And this digital signal is fed directly into the ephes. And that's one thing I wanted to work out actually, is where is the digital ephes signal. I mean, here's the loom. Where does it go? Looks like that might be it there. RS232 interface or something. I've also got these white wires. That actually looks like the AC off the engine, the 3 phases, to go into the regulator, rectifier regulator. And there'll be a couple of connections here somewhere as well that go to the capacitor. The capacitor I think was mounted here somewhere. It got damaged in the crash. So yeah, that's a quick look at that. I don't know what you guys are like at wiring. Fortunately, I've got some training in automotive electrical and electronics technician, so I should be pretty safe to do all this and work it all out. It's all fairly logical, one step at a time, just work on one thing at a time, and we'll get there in the end. And I've also got, of course, the circuit diagrams from P&M manuals. These 2 wires, I don't know where they go. I don't know what they're for. I'm trying to work it out from the Rotax manual and the manufacturer's wiring manual, but at this stage I have a sneaking suspicion I know what they are. Okay, that should end this video quite nicely there, and we'll catch up soon. See you later. Bye.